Hello team, welcome back. We are here to talk about CrossFit Open Workout 22.2. My name is Ed Haynes and joining me on Zoom today is Ant Haynes.
Hello.
The agenda for today in this video, we are going to talk about our general thoughts on the workout. A lot of those general thoughts will be geared around having watched the 4 elite guys and girls do the workout. We'll then break down the individual movements. We'll talk about the bar facing burpee. We've got a new standard there, a few things to think about, and then we'll talk about the deadlift. Then we will talk about pacing and strategy. We've created 3 different avatars for you guys, given that there'll be a really different approach to this workout based upon your abilities. We'll go through some thoughts and suggestions for each of those avatars. And then lastly, we'll talk about some things to think about in your warm-up to ensure that you execute this workout to the best of your ability. Okay, first and foremost, just want to say thank you once again to the amazing sponsors who are helping us put together this show each week. Big shout out to Life Aid Asia, Earned Athletic Apparel, and Proper Pastures, our supporting sponsors, Lyra Spirits, Wine and Things Hong Kong, MG GERAGHTY Insurance Brokers, Ultra Hemp, Biltong Chief, Bandit Coffee, Clean Nutrition, Bear Bells, and Nocco Hong Kong. Thank you guys. We love you. Always appreciate your support. First and foremost, and let's talk about just general thoughts on the workout. I'll kick things off here. First thing I want to say is that the time cap is tough. Most CrossFit Open workouts, they usually create a somewhat achievable time cap for the majority, or at least 50%, I'd say, of the population to complete it. We even saw one of the elite athletes this week, Emma Lawson, who is a CrossFit Games athlete on the team division many times, very, very capable individual, still have 10 reps to go when the time cap hit. Laura Horvath, who is a top 3 CrossFit Games athlete, consistently finished in about 9 minutes 30, only had 30 seconds to go. What are your thoughts there, Ant?
Firstly, it's obviously a very simple workout. It's not overly complicated. It's a lot of reps. I know you look at the 1 to 10, it looks okay, but I mean, you're accumulating 200 reps, 100 of each. And I just think, this one's going to come down to a lot of strategy. Like you just said, you're getting top athletes who potentially getting caught up in the atmosphere of the announcement. I think a good strategy here could really help athletes who are maybe unsure if they can get under that time cap or unsure of where they're going to finish. It could really them achieve a really solid score here.
Yeah, I think, there's probably not going to be too many people who have actually, and it always is the case with CrossFit Open workouts, who will have done this exact combination. Something that I thought about straight away was 7 minutes of burpees. The reason I thought about that was 7 minutes of burpees. A lot of people have done that workout at some point in their CrossFit career. Now, whilst it's not a bar facing burpee, it does give people an idea as to how long 100 repetitions might take you. Thinking back to when I did, I think I got around about 115 repetitions in 7 minutes. Now I'm going to have to do 100 bar facing burpees, which is arguably a slower movement, combined with deadlifts, and I've only got 10 minutes to do it. That for me at least gives me a bit of a reference as to just how challenging finishing this workout within a 10-minute time cap is going to be. Any thoughts on that?
No, yeah, I agree. I don't think many people really, unless they have been around with CrossFit that long, will have actually hit 100 reps of these movements in this close of a time frame. But definitely, I think everyone's done probably 20 bar facing burpees in a workout at some point, and they know, and you probably remember how slow you felt you were moving when you're doing 20 in the middle of a workout. Now just imagine condensing that 5 times over, and suddenly you've got so many to do. I think it's just like I mentioned before, it's all about pacing on this workout and being smart on the beginning 1 to 10, which will allow you to hopefully excel through the 10 down to 1.
Yeah, that was just going to be a general thought of mine. It's always very tough to give a strategy for these kind of workouts where, ascending ladders are very hard to pace anyway, but when you have an ascending followed by a descending, makes it even more challenging. What I will say is that everyone, no matter who you are, is going to feel like Superman and Superwoman in that first round of 1 to 5 repetitions. But this workout in particular, is not going to be won in the first 2 to 5 minutes of the workout. The key is preserving energy and output so that the second half of the workout, the second 5 minutes of this workout, wherever your ability level is where you need to push. That is also the biggest potential for you to lose time. If you go too fast at the start and you have to stand around just resting because you're forced to rest, that is where we start to lose ground on the leaderboard or in our scores. In terms of limiters, I mean, there's going to be lots of different limiters for different people, but the thing we can say for everyone is that the two movement patterns here are somewhat similar. We've got flexion and extension of the spine. You're going to feel hamstrings, you're going to feel low back, probably going to feel the midline the next day, maybe not so much in the workout. Obviously, for those who are elite, who are going to be looking to push finishing this workout, this is going to most probably be, as well as everything we just talked about, a breathing limiter as well. Okay, let's get into individual movement breakdown. We're going to start with the bar facing burpee. To those who competed in the semi-finals and the CrossFit Games last year, this is not a new standard, but for those competing in the CrossFit Open and probably what you're used to doing in your affiliate or in your training program, this will be a slight adjustment to the standard. The standards are that a 2-foot takeoff and landing is not required. The athlete must clearly jump over the barbell. Both feet must be off the ground as the athlete passes over the bar. Stepping over is not permitted. Now, the standards, when you read them there, are pretty clear, but when you watch athletes do this, who flirt with the movement standards of a step over and a jump over, it can look like at first glance that the movement standards are not being met. So what I would advise is, if you are thinking about changing up your technique to make it a little bit more of a 1-foot landing, 1-foot takeoff, make sure you film it, slow it down to make sure that both feet are passing over the bar with both feet off the floor. And anything to add?
No, I think just in terms of the efficiency, when you have 100 reps to complete, I know we always mention this as dialing in the technique as much as you possibly can, so that when you are in a world of hurt, if you ever get to that stage, doing these burpees where there actually is quite a high technical skill point to it, is done like the back of your hand. You know exactly what you're going to do every single time. You have the same amount of steps. Your feet swing the same or opposite way each time. Efficiency tips are getting as close to the bar as you possibly can to avoid more step ups. And then, of course, staying as low as possible to the ground. There's no need to stand all the way up. I think Medeiros did that really well as well. He just looked super smooth as he's going through. If your body's having to do more global flexion extension throughout that entire movement, when you know you already have that on the deadlift, that's just going to be an extra little percentage of work to do, which is just going to kind of add up over those 200 reps. So yeah, staying nice and low to the floor and staying nice and close to your barbell, and every single burpee looking exactly the same.
Awesome. Just something to add to that. Hopefully this is something you've already practiced, but trying to think about alternating your legs in the step up. If you are doing a step up on the burpee, I think we could probably recommend safely that most people should be doing a step up here. The 2-foot jump up is just going to leave you quite a long way away from the bar, although you could potentially do a step in and then jump over the bar. But if you are doing any form of step up technique, make sure you're alternating your legs as much as possible to try spread the fatigue over both legs, because you're going to need both legs in both movements. With that said, if alternating is not something you practiced, and if you do it in your warm up or your trial run and it's just way too confusing that you can't do it when you're fresh, you probably can't do it on fatigue, just go with what feels most comfortable. Just a couple of other things to talk about the movement standard for the burpee, where a lot of people often trip up. I don't actually mean tripping over the bar, but make mistakes and get no reps, is number one, not being perpendicular with the bar on the floor. So there is a tape standard. So you will have to put the straight line. This is not something you'll be new to if you did the CrossFit Open last year and you've done things like burpee box jump overs. You will need to have your hands and feet either side of the bar. This stops people doing their burpees at an angle. And the second thing is just make sure that your chest is touching the floor. So as you get over the bar, make sure you're getting far enough away from the barbell so you're not having to not get your chest to the floor because you think your head's going to hit the bar. And anything to add on that?
Just like we've seen in the past, if you do drop the bar, because we're all going to be dumping the bar from the top of the deadlift, I assume, when that bar moves, just make sure your judge doesn't touch it. And maybe next set, you just try to drop it slightly back towards the center of the line or wherever it might be.
In terms of pacing and speed of these burpees, we'll talk about that when we get into pacing and strategy. Let's quickly go into deadlifts. There's not too much to talk about here. There isn't any new movement standards here. Just make sure you are fully locking out your knees and hips with your head and shoulders finishing behind the bar at the top. That is a clear standard. It's easy to judge, but it's often an area, I know certainly an area that I sometimes fall short on, is just making sure the knees and the hips are fully extended. And just like you said, Ant, because that bar is going to have to stay in the middle of that line, be conscious about your dropping of the barbell. Make sure we're trying to get it straight back down, because you don't want to waste time in the workout having to move the bar back to its correct position. Anything to add?
No, nothing to add on that.
Okay, let's talk about pacing and strategy now. We have created 3 different avatars. Now, we're aware that there may be more than 3 avatars, but hopefully you'll sit somewhat clearly into one of these 3 buckets. The first avatar we're going to talk about is someone who's going to be doing this workout, scaled or RX, and the deadlift is about 80 to 100% of your 1 rep max. So as a percentage. So what that means is that this is a fairly heavy deadlift for you. Just a few things to think about here. Number one, make sure you have a strong brace before each repetition and try to execute all reps with perfect technique. High rep, heavy deadlift workouts are an easy way to damage the body and have to suffer in the short, medium, and long term. We need to have our eyes on the long run. Of course, if you are someone who's looking to push the quarterfinals, semifinals of CrossFit Games, then you're assuming there is a risk at doing this sport, and therefore you need to accept that risk. But if you're doing this for fun, for challenge, but also you're training for longevity, just remember we want to see perfect repetitions here. Don't get too caught up in chasing intensity and compromising form. With that said, wearing a belt, if it's something you practice using in the year, might be a good idea for you to use in this workout. It's just going to give you that extra feedback for the brace. With that said, it will help your brace, but it's also going to elevate your breathing. So it's a bit of a trade-off there. And anything to add on those first 2 points?
No, I think as well with those deadlifts, I think with the burpees, you got to just bear in mind that your burpees are not going to be limiting you. So there's no point in taking your time on the burpee, racing through trying to take it, you're basically nailing your deadlift first, then trying to race through the burpees to make up that time that you lost on your deadlifts. And then suddenly you're back to your deadlift even faster than you probably want to be, elevated heart rate, a bit more fatigue, and then suddenly you have to go into another high rep set. So I think you got to slow down the cadence of the burpee, although it's an easier movement, to allow you to be as fresh as possible for that hardest movement. It's your kind of limiter-based model that we work off.
Yeah, and that's a mistake that a lot of people do make, the concept of, well, this movement's hard for me, so I'm going to be slow on the deadlift, so I need to pick up the speed of my burpees to give me more time to execute the hardest movement for me. But as you just said there, we don't want to be getting back to our hardest movement in a fatigue-based state. So the key for you guys, if this is you need to break up your deadlifts early. So even in the kind of first few rounds, start breaking your reps up into manageable sets. Those deadlifts are only going to get harder as the fatigue increases, and also as the repetitions increase. Your burpees, you need to basically find a pace where you can essentially walk through your burpees. That's essentially what I want you to think about. It's a fast walk or a slow jog. But when we get back to our deadlift, we're not feeling overly fatigued. For you guys, don't worry about the clock. We're not thinking about finishing this workout. We're just trying to find a pace that allows us to move methodically with good positions and technique for 10 minutes. Wherever you finish up, as long as we're healthy, we're happy. Let's talk about our second avatar here. So our second avatar is someone who maybe this deadlift load, scaled or RX, is between 50 to 75% of your 1 rep max. So what we're trying to say here is that it's not an overly heavy deadlift. It's still going to be challenging, especially with the repetitions prescribed. But in terms of getting that thing off the floor when fresh, it's not a problem for you. For you guys, breathing plus lower back or posterior chain muscle endurance is probably going to be the limiter here. So when I say breathing, is because you're not necessarily going to be limited by any one movement, like overly, where it's going to completely stop you unless you, of course, pace it poorly. You're going to be breathing hard. Heart rate's going to be elevated. Breathing rate's going to be elevated. Bear in mind as well, deadlifts require a lot of bracing. So when we brace, we minimize the amount of breaths that we're taking, which means that when we stop the brace, suddenly our heart rate is elevated. Our breathing rate is elevated. The goal here for you guys is going to be much the same as the first avatar, but your deadlifts will be executed in slightly bigger sets and your burpees are going to be slightly faster. I would say just one main thing to think about for you guys: no forced rest. What we mean by forced rest is if you go too fast that you simply just need to stand there and recover before you can pick up the bar or go into a burpee. We do not want that happening at any point in the workout. So what we need to be doing instead is doing smart, strategic force breaks early on so that we're continuing to move through that 10 minutes. And anything to add?
No, I think I know you and I spoke about it before, but don't even worry about trying to go unbroken on these deadlifts. I don't think it's a necessity. As we mentioned before, I think we'll see plenty of people finishing this workout under the 10-minute time cap whilst still not going unbroken. So, when you get towards the 7 to 10 and 10 back down to 7, having a smart break or two in those sets, as long as you're diligent with your rest time and you're responsible at managing that, I still think you can get a very good score or a very good time on this workout if doing that. So don't feel like you have to hold on to the deadlift set just because you could do 20 unbroken reps at 225 or 155 fresh. There's absolutely no need to do so.
Yeah. I think something to think about, what a lot of people may be thinking is, oh, maybe I should go unbroken on the deadlifts and just go really slow on the burpees. Now, that will definitely be an option. But you just got to remember the time taken to complete one burpee is considerably slower than a time taken to complete one deadlift. So actually, you'd be better off maintaining a moderate burpee pace, putting some deliberate breaks in. Honestly, for this avatar, I would say from the round of 5 onwards, putting some smart breaks into your deadlift, moderate pace on the burpee would be much better than you holding on to bigger sets in deadlifts and going crawling through your burpees. Your burpees really need to be executed at just a smooth pace. I would say play with the standard and try to find like a slow to moderate jogging pace, if that's what you can think about. A slow to moderate jogging pace in a burpees just to allow you to continually move. Again, same thing for you guys. It's the second half of the workout where the time is going to be made, and that's where a good score is going to be created. Okay, our last avatar, we are now talking about the elite. So when I define the elite, we're talking about people who are pushing perhaps for a semi-final spot or looking to get to the CrossFit Games. Really here, when we look at the athletes who took on this workout, deadlifts were all completed unbroken. Now, the thing that separated the athletes and what allowed Medeiros to finish in 7.5 and what meant that Emma Lawson got time capped with 10 reps to go is really the cadence of your burpees. So if unbroken deadlifts is something you want to aim towards, you just got to think about how fast your burpee is. I would honestly say if you are a good athlete, you can finish this workout by breaking your deadlifts, probably breaking your deadlifts in around a 7, maybe just one break per set, as long as that break is not exceeding more than kind of 5 to 8 seconds. If you have a decently fast burpee cadence and burpees are not something that completely taxes you, you could definitely finish this workout under the 10-minute time cap. Any thoughts?
No, not really. I think, I think Matt Fraser said it. I think the upper end of the athletes is kind of just going to be, you'll be able to just move through this workout with not too much thought, really. If you're kind of just towards the bottom half of the elite, then you might have to have, like you said, a bit more of a thought and process behind the actual strategy that you hit. But yeah, hopefully should be finishing it. But I mean, like you said, Emma Lawson, who is a incredibly capable individual athlete, multiple times games level athlete, still didn't finish this workout. Horvath was flirting with the time cap as well. So it's going to be interesting to see this spread. I think I'm just not really sure how the rest of the field will really pull up on it.
I just think something to think about. I know watching the best in the world do these workouts isn't always an accurate representation of what it's going to look like for you, but something you can definitely see is that there was very minimal breakdown or attrition of their deadlift technique. Deadlift technique more or less stayed the same from the start. Now, what I will say is that if you're starting this workout, even if you're a strong individual and you are pulling those deadlifts with a rounded back, just remember, you're going to put a lot of stress on things like the erectors of the back, and it may be all right for a few rounds, but just with the amount of repetition and a rounding to the back and things like burpees as well, that is going to wreak havoc on you. So it's within your interest, even from a health and safety perspective, but even from a performance perspective, try to lift with good mechanics in that deadlift as much as you can from the start. Okay, let's lastly just quickly talk about what we need to think about in terms of warm-up for our process programming subscribers. We are going to add this warm-up into the notes on What Up, so make sure you check that out. So we're going to start with movement prep, just some things to think about in terms of muscles, calves and tibs. We're going to need these guys nice and warmed up for jumping over that barbell. Double leg hinge. So obviously things like Romanian deadlifts, anything where we are hinging at the hip is going to be good, but I would also think about warming up our erectors. The likelihood is for most of us, while we talked about good technique and the importance of good technique, are probably going to break into some form of rounding at some point in this workout, just making sure the erectors are ready for that. So things like light Jefferson curls or GHG spine extensions, back extensions, where you're actually deliberately rounding and extending through your spine might be a good idea here. We want to definitely prep thoracic and spine extension. Think about getting up and off the floor or like you're popping up onto a surfboard. And then single leg hip flexion, because we're going to be doing some form of step up on these burpees for most people. Just make sure that kind of Spider-Man lunge pose is feeling nice and prepped. We then want to think about creating tension and stiffness. Now, the heavier the bar is for you, the more tension and stiffness you should think about creating your warm up. What I mean by that is that because if a deadlift is heavy, we need to be able to ramp up a lot of tension in the spine to protect the spine. So in your warm up, think about including things like sandbag, D-ball carries, hollow holds, L-sits, side planks, front planks, and dead bugs. If it's a light load for you, then perhaps you don't really need to focus on this, because that deadlift is going to be, you're going to be able to move that in more like in an aerobic setting. The very last thing to think about, specific movement prep now. I would definitely build to the deadlift first. Practice touch and go repetitions. If you're thinking about breaking these deadlifts from the start, practice doing a couple of small sets. So you're practicing dropping and picking the bar back up. And then make sure you're really warming up the aerobic system as well as doing the movement. So something like 30 seconds to 1 minute on a row or assault bike, get off and go straight into something like 1, 2, 3 repetitions of deadlifts and bar facing burpees. Rest a couple of minutes. You can do that a few times. And anything else to add?
No, not really. I think we've covered it all. Yeah, I think it's just going to be a battle of attrition for a lot of people. 200 reps, 100 of each one is a lot, especially for that deadlift. I think generally people just be able to keep moving on the burpee and they'll just suffer through that. But just be wary of the deadlift, like we've kind of touched on for the 3 different avatars that we have.
Awesome. All right, folks. To those of you getting our first workout, best of luck. As always, if you do have any questions or you want more information on strategies, please reach out to us. Of course, you're a part of the Process Program community. You have more specific questions related to you, reach out to the coach who follows you. They'll be able to help you with some specific things that might help you get a better score in this workout. Make sure you do your cool down. Make sure you look after things like nutrition. These things are hard on the body and the mind, and we have to keep our eyes on the long term. And thank you for joining me, and good luck, everyone.
Good luck.